The sliding glass doors of the military hospital hissed open, and the hot midday sun spilled across the polished floor. I had been in that building for nearly 7 months, yet I never imagined stepping out of it like this, in a wheelchair, with both legs gone above the knee, a folded American flag resting on my lap, and the weight of a war carved into my body. I was Major Daniel Cross, 48 years old, United States Army. For over 2 decades, my life had been nothing but service. Iraq, Afghanistan, and most recently, a classified joint operation supporting Israeli forces in their fight against the Islamic State in the Sinai Peninsula. I had been in firefights that lasted days, pulled wounded brothers out of burning vehicles, and carried the dead so they could go home draped in the flag. But nothing, not even the day I lost my legs, prepared me for what was waiting outside the hospital doors. She was there leaning against our old silver SUV. Sarah, my fiancée of 8 years. I'd pictured this reunion 100 times during my rehab. In my mind, she would run to me, wrap her arms around me, maybe cry into my shoulder. I thought about how I'd hold her hand and tell her I was still the same man, still hers, but reality has a way of cutting deeper than any shrapnel. She didn't move when she saw me. Her eyes were cold, scanning the chair, the empty space where my legs had been, the ribbons on my chest. And then, with a look I'll never forget, she pushed herself off the SUV, crossed her arms, and said the words that split my soul in two. "Who told you to go to war?" It wasn't a question. It was a sentence as a verdict. Her voice was sharp, almost mocking. Around us, nurses froze mid-step, and a young corporal escorting me out glanced away, as if he'd just overheard something too personal to witness. My hands clenched on the wheels of my chair, knuckles whitening. I thought I had misheard her, but she kept going. "You chose this. You left me for months to play hero, and now you expect me to take care of you like some nurse?" Her words hit harder than the explosion that took my legs. That blast, a buried IED just outside Rafah, had ripped through the front of our convoy, killing 2 Israeli soldiers instantly and pinning me inside a burning MRAP. I remembered the heat, the smell of diesel, the roar of incoming gunfire as medics dragged me out. But at least the enemy's attack had been honest. This was betrayal dressed as truth. The corporal cleared his throat. "Sir, I can—" "No," I interrupted, forcing my voice steady. "I've got it." I wheeled myself toward the SUV, my arms still weak from months of therapy, each push a reminder of what I'd lost. Sarah didn't offer to help. She just stood there, frowning, tapping her keys against her palm. The silence between us was louder than the hospital's busy parking lot. I had rehearsed telling her everything, the mission details I could share, the moments I thought of her when I thought I might die, the plans I had for us despite the injury. Instead, I found myself staring at her, trying to recognize the woman I had left behind, the one I had worked overtime to spoil with trips, gifts, and the house she never had to pay for, the one who'd promised to wait for me no matter what. But promises mean nothing when they meet reality. On the drive home, she barely spoke. The radio filled the silence with commercials and static. Every bump in the road rattled through my chair and up my spine. I kept my eyes on the horizon, watching the city blur past. I didn't know it yet, but every mile we drove was taking me closer to the decision that would change my life forever. That night, I struggled to transfer from my chair to the bed. My arms ached, my phantom pains burned like live wires, and Sarah sat in the living room scrolling through her phone. "No, are you okay?" No offer to help. Just the faint blue light of her screen glowing through the doorway. Lying there in the dark, I replayed her words over and over. "Who told you to go to war?" I thought about the brothers I'd lost, the men whose last breaths I'd witnessed, the oath I'd sworn long before she ever came into my life. I didn't need anyone to tell me to go. I went because it was my duty. And now somehow that duty had cost me more than my legs. It had cost me the person I thought I could count on most. But I didn't know then that losing her would be the start of getting my life back. The first week home felt less like returning from war and more like being dropped into enemy territory without backup. The house was the same furniture, same photographs on the mantel, but the atmosphere was different, colder, quieter. Sarah spoke to me the way someone speaks to a stranger they're forced to share a bus seat with. Short, clipped, polite only when necessary. She would cook for herself, but not for both of us. If I asked for help getting something from a high cabinet, she'd sigh, roll her eyes, and do it as if it were an unbearable inconvenience. One evening, I asked her to bring me my medication from the kitchen. She tossed the bottle into my lap without a word and walked away. The pills scattered across the floor, and as I bent awkwardly to pick them up, my wheelchair tipped slightly. My heart pounded, not from the near fall, but from the realization that I had been more respected by enemy fighters than by the woman I was supposed to marry. I'd given her everything. 8 years of covering bills so she could figure out her career. Vacations she didn't plan or pay for. A home with her name on the deed alongside mine. And all she'd given me back was an empty promise to be there through thick and thin. She spent most of her time locked in the bedroom with her phone. At first I thought she was avoiding me because she didn't know how to handle the sight of my injuries. But then I caught a glimpse of her screen one night while she sat on the couch. She was laughing at something on a video call with someone else, a man. I didn't say anything in that moment. My body was too tired for confrontation, but a quiet, heavy shift happened inside me. For years, I'd been a soldier on the battlefield. Now I realized I was in another war, one I hadn't chosen, a war for my dignity. The next day, she made a comment that cut deeper than she probably intended, or maybe exactly as she intended. "You can't expect me to take care of you like this forever. I didn't sign up to be a nurse." The words hit like a sniper's bullet. There was no pity in her tone, no hesitation, just a statement of fact, as if my worth had been amputated along with my legs. I wheeled myself into the study and shut the door. My hands rested on the worn wooden desk, and for a long time I just stared at the medals hanging on the wall, the bronze star, the purple heart. Each one represented sacrifice, moments when I'd chosen to risk my life for others, and here I was living with someone who wouldn't even carry a grocery bag if it meant helping me. That night, lying awake in bed, I thought about the blast again. I could still smell the scorched metal, hear the crack of small arms fire as I fought to stay conscious. The medics had told me I flatlined twice on the way to the hospital. I had survived something most men didn't. And yet, in the silence of my own home, I felt more dead than alive. One morning, about 2 weeks after coming home, Sarah didn't even pretend anymore. Over coffee, she said, "You need to think about your future, Daniel, and I'm not sure I'm part of it." She didn't flinch, didn't look away. She might as well have been discussing the weather. I looked down at my hands, calloused, scarred, and still strong, and I realized something I'd been avoiding. The real injury wasn't my legs. It was the part of me that had been holding on to a woman who never saw my worth. The decision was starting to take shape in my mind, even if I wasn't ready to say it out loud. And when the moment came, it would be final. It happened on a Thursday morning, the kind of morning when the world outside looked peaceful, but inside our walls the tension was thick enough to choke on. The air felt stale, heavy with unspoken words. I had woken early, as I always did since the hospital. Old habits from the army die hard. Even without reveille, even without legs to swing over the side of the bed, my body still ran on mission time. I rolled into the kitchen and started the coffee, the sound of it percolating filling the silence. I'd learned to move around the house in my chair without asking for help, even though every movement cost energy. Sarah came in about 20 minutes later. She was still in a silk robe I'd bought her for her birthday last year. It was wrinkled, half-tied, her hair pulled into a careless bun. She poured herself coffee without saying good morning, took the last clean mug, and left the empty pot sitting there for me. "Would have been nice if you made enough for both of us," I said, keeping my tone even. She gave me a quick glance over her shoulder. "You can make more, you've got time." The words were casual, but they landed like an insult. I had time now. That's what she saw when she looked at me. Not the years I had spent serving my country. Not the injuries I had earned doing a job most people couldn't even imagine. Just a man with nothing better to do. I took a slow breath, letting it out through my nose. "Sarah, we need to talk." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "About what?" "About us. about how things have been since I came home. She set her mug down on the counter with a sharp clink. Daniel, you're not the same. Everything is harder now, and I can't carry all of it. This isn't the life I wanted. Her voice was steady, and that steadiness hurt more than if she had shouted. She wasn't even angry, just done. I wheeled forward, closing the space between us. Do you remember the night before I shipped out? You said you'd be here when I came back, no matter what. That was before I knew what no matter what meant, she replied without hesitation. That was the moment I knew there was nothing left to salvage. It wasn't just a bad stretch or stress talking. This was who she was, and I'd been blind to it. But blindness doesn't last forever. Eventually you open your eyes. I didn't yell, I didn't throw things. My voice came out low, calm, and final. Pack your things. She blinked, startled. What? You heard me. Pack your things and get out. Today. Her mouth opened, then closed again. I could see the storm brewing in her eyes, disbelief giving way to anger. You can't just... I can. This is my house. You've lived here on my paycheck, my retirement, my deployments. I came home expecting a partner. What I got was a stranger who sees me as a burden. I won't live like that. She crossed her arms. You'll regret this. You can't take care of yourself forever. You'll need someone. I met her gaze without flinching. I'd rather crawl on my hands than spend one more day with someone who wishes I hadn't made it back alive. Her face twisted, whether from guilt or fury I couldn't tell. But she turned, walked down the hall, and slammed the bedroom door. I stayed in the kitchen, listening to the sound of drawers opening and closing, the dull thud of suitcase wheels rolling over hardwood. My chest felt tight, but it wasn't grief. It was something closer to relief, like stepping out of body armor after hours under the sun. When she finally emerged, she didn't look at me. She dragged her suitcase to the door, opened it, and left without a goodbye. The silence that followed was different, not empty, clean. I wheeled into the living room and just sat there for a while, staring at the medals on the wall. I thought about the men I had served with, men who had lost more than I had, but still found a way to fight for every inch of life they had left. I thought about the Israeli soldiers who had been in the convoy that day, one of them only 22, who didn't survive the blast. And then I thought about myself. Not the man Sarah saw, but the man I knew I still was. A soldier, a leader, someone who had faced worse and come out alive. For the first time since I left the hospital, I felt in control. I spent the rest of the day reclaiming my space. I boxed up the things she'd left behind, clothes, jewelry, a few framed photos I didn't care to keep. I set them by the door and called a buddy from my unit to come by later. When I went to bed that night, the house felt different, lighter. I didn't dream about the explosion. I didn't wake up in the grip of phantom pain. For once, I slept straight through. The next morning, I wheeled into the kitchen and made coffee. Enough for one. And it was enough. What I didn't know was that this decision to remove her from my life would open the door to something bigger. Within weeks, the Army and the State Department would contact me. There would be ceremonies, commendations, and a financial bonus I had never expected. And with it, a new life. But that part of the story was still on the horizon. For now, all I knew was that I had finally taken my first real step forward, even without legs. The morning after Sarah left, I woke to a strange silence. Not the uneasy quiet that had hung over the house for weeks, but a clean, weightless kind of stillness. For the first time since I'd rolled out of that hospital, I didn't feel like an intruder in my own home. I brewed coffee, this time filling the pot just for me. No glances over my shoulder, no passive-aggressive sighs. The kitchen smelled like roasted beans and freedom. Still, I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a part of me replaying the moment she'd wheeled her suitcase out the door. 8 years of my life, gone in less than 5 minutes. But as the steam curled up from my mug, I realized something important. I didn't miss her. I missed the version of her I thought was real. The woman who said she'd stand by me. That version had died long before my convoy hit that IED. Later that morning, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A few minutes later, another call came. This time, the voice on the other end was one I recognized instantly. Captain Reed, an old friend from my early days in the service. "Danny," he said. Only a handful of people still called me that. "I heard what happened. Words going around that you're back stateside. You've got a lot of people here who want to shake your hand, and what you're going to want to answer when the brass calls. Big things in motion." I didn't know what he meant at the time, but I thanked him. We talked for a bit about the old days, about guys we'd lost touch with, and then he hung up. An hour later, the brass called. It wasn't just some officer checking in, it was a joint call, my commanding officer from the US Army and a liaison from the Israeli Defense Forces. They wanted me at a ceremony the following month. Apparently, my actions in Sinai, pulling 2 wounded Israeli soldiers from the wreckage under fire even after losing my legs, had been reviewed all the way up the chain. I was to receive high honors from both governments. They also told me something I didn't expect. There was a financial award coming, a substantial one. "In recognition of your service and sacrifice," they said. It would be enough to pay off my house, upgrade my vehicle for accessibility, and still have a solid cushion for whatever came next. When I hung up, I just sat there staring at the wall. The timing was almost poetic. Sarah had left thinking I'd be helpless without her. She had no idea that my life was about to become more stable than it had ever been. Over the next few weeks, I focused on myself. Physical therapy twice a week, upper body workouts in the garage, and sessions with a prosthetics specialist who was confident I'd be walking again, slowly, but walking, within months. One afternoon, while I was learning to balance on parallel bars with my new prosthetic sockets, my phone lit up with her name, Sarah. I let it ring. She called again and again. Finally, I answered, just to hear what she had to say. "Daniel, I've been thinking," she began, her voice soft in a way it hadn't been in years. "I made a mistake. I was scared, and I said things I didn't mean. We can make this work. I'll help you." I almost laughed. "You didn't make a mistake, Sarah. You showed me who you are, and I believe you." There was a pause, then sharper. "You can't just throw away 8 years. You did that the second you looked at me and saw less than a man." I hung up, blocked her number. The day of the ceremony came faster than I expected. The auditorium was packed, rows of uniforms, dignitaries, and families. My name was called, and I wheeled myself onto the stage to a standing ovation. The Israeli liaison pinned their medal to my chest, followed by my CO presenting the US commendation. Cameras flashed. Somewhere in the crowd, I heard my name shouted by old squad mates. When the applause finally died down, I looked out at that sea of faces. I realized that for all the loss I'd endured, my legs, my fiancée, I still had something far more important. My brothers and sisters in arms, people who understood sacrifice, people who didn't need to be convinced of my worth. After the ceremony, the financial award was processed quickly. I made upgrades to the house, bought state-of-the-art prosthetics, and invested the rest. I had more independence in those first few weeks than I'd had in years. But there was still something missing, not a person, but a sense of belonging. That's when I heard about Camp Valor, a secluded retreat for veterans dealing with physical injuries and PTSD. It was more than a rehab facility. It was a place to live among people who understood, a community built on shared battles, both past and present. The first night there, I sat by the fire pit with 3 other vets. One had lost an arm in Afghanistan, another had burns over half his body from an oil fire in Iraq, and the third walked with a limp from a sniper round in Syria. We didn't need to explain our stories to each other. The scars did that for us. And for the first time since that blast, I felt whole. The first morning at Camp Valor started with the sound of gravel crunching under boots. I rolled out onto the porch of my cabin, the air crisp and clean in a way city air never could be. The sun was just breaking over the pine line, and for a moment I simply breathed. No rush, no orders, no tension in the air. Veterans moved about the camp with quiet purpose. Some walked on prosthetics like mine, others used canes, and a few wheeled themselves along dirt paths, trading jokes in voices weathered by years of service. I noticed something immediately. Here, no one stared at my missing legs. No one looked at me with pity or suspicion. Every man and woman in this place had paid their price in full, and we all carried the receipt in our scars. I joined the group for breakfast in the mess hall. Scrambled eggs, bacon, and coffee strong enough to strip paint. Conversations flowed easily. We didn't talk about politics or the news. We talked about life, about the small victories like getting up without help or managing to run, even just a few steps, on prosthetics. In the afternoons, we trained together. The camp had a full gym, adaptive sports equipment, even an obstacle course designed for vets with mobility challenges. The first time I made it across the balance platform on my prosthetics, the guys cheered like I'd just finished a marathon. I hadn't felt that kind of camaraderie since my last deployment. Nights were my favorite. We'd gather around the fire pit, swapping stories that most civilians wouldn't understand, or want to. Some were funny, others were raw. There were moments when the firelight caught a man's eyes, and you could see him slip into memories he'd tried to bury. But here, he wasn't alone. None of us were. It was during one of those nights that I realized just how much had changed since that morning outside the hospital. I remembered Sarah's voice sharp as a blade. "Who told you to go to war?" At the time, those words had been meant to wound, to make me doubt my choices. But now, sitting there with my brothers and sisters, I understood something she never could. No one had to tell me to go to war. It was never about orders. It was about who I am. That's when I thought back to the day I told her to pack her things, the day I cut out the part of my life that was dragging me under. People talk about losing limbs as the hardest thing they've ever endured. For me, that wasn't it. The blast in Sinai took my legs, but letting go of Sarah, that took something deeper. It was the moment I stopped holding on to the wrong person and started holding on to myself again. And yes, it was the hardest decision of my life. Months passed and I grew stronger, physically, mentally, emotionally. The prosthetics felt like extensions of me now, tools instead of reminders of what I'd lost. My bonus had allowed me to make the camp my permanent home, contributing to its upkeep, mentoring new arrivals and helping run training sessions. One afternoon, while I was working with a new vet on parallel bars, my phone buzzed. I almost ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. It was a message from an unknown number. "I'm sorry. I hope you're okay." No name, but I knew who it was. I looked at the words for a moment, then deleted the message without replying. I didn't feel anger or satisfaction. I felt nothing at all, and that was the real closure. As the sun dipped behind the trees that evening, I sat on the porch of my cabin, the medal from the ceremony hanging beside my door. The fire pit crackled in the distance, and laughter carried through the cool night air. I had lost a lot, more than most people will ever understand. But I had gained something far more valuable: peace, purpose, and the knowledge that I was surrounded by the only kind of family that truly lasts. The kind that would never look at me and see less of a man.